Welcome to Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast. Today, Cloud9 to Neopia. Two educators. First virtual pet experience.
Folks, it's Skinner here, back with Chalmers for another thrilling episode of Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast. How's everybody doing out there in Memfield? Air happy, hope you're all still basking in the glow of a brand new year. New Year's Eve certainly gave us something to chew on.
Absolutely, Skinner. Air happy, it feels like just yesterday we were scrambling for resolutions that lasted longer than a week. But hey, at least we tried, right? 'Cause anyways, I heard something pretty intriguing from our community corner. Something that had us both sitting up straighter than usual.
Oh, really? What's got you two suddenly perky?
Well, Rachelrocks, remember her. She's been a fixture in our Discord server, always popping up with great insights and stories. Last week during ArticTiger's live stream, LLMs I, Rachelrocks dropped a bombshell, or rather, a cheese-rolling bomb. She shared a picture of this adorable Neopets item, a book of funny anecdotes about cheese rolling. Her smiling, it caught Skinner's eye like a moth to a flame, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, cheese rolling. That's right up my alley. I couldn't resist digging deeper into this mystery book. Turns out it's not just any old cheese tales. It's got some real-world cheese rolling adventures, too. Airhap I even managed to snag a real cheese-themed book from a local specialty shop. It smells divine. Sniffs, can you believe it, Chalmers? I've got a cheese-rolling book in my hands, and it's like Christmas morning. Every time I crack it open,
Cheese rolling, Skinner. You're telling me you've spent more time reading about cheese rolling than some of our pet care manuals combined.
you have no idea. Happy, there's one particular anecdote that just floored me. Talked about a competition where folks rolled wheels of cheese down a steep hill in their PJs. I mean, come on. It's like something straight out of a cartoon, but real life. Chuckles, I felt like I was living in a dream world blending reality and whimsy.
So, how did you manage to get your hands on such a specific item? Did you have to do a little detective work?
Oh, you bet your bottom dollar on it. Excited, I started by digging through online forums and communities where cheese enthusiasts congregate. There were forums dedicated to cheese rolling, and some savvy folks even sell these kinds of thin books online. I got lucky, found a little shop that specialized in quirky gifts and local cheese products. They had exactly what I needed. Smiling, and it wasn't just the book. They even threw in some artisanal cheese samples. It was like a whole cheese experience wrapped up in one package.
Wow, Skinner, you really went all out. But here's the kicker. Why do you think this little Neopets connection sparked such enthusiasm within our community?
I think it taps into something deeper, Chalmers. It's about nostalgia, pure and simple. Remember when virtual pets were just starting out, back when probably some of the people in our community were kids or teenagers themselves. Neopets brought a whole new dimension to play, a blend of caring for pets, earning virtual currency, and exploring vibrant worlds. It's like stepping back into a cherished memory but with a fresh twist. Happy and Rachelrocks sharing this little tidbit maybe just reignited that flame for a lot of folks who thought they'd outgrown it. It's amazing how these virtual worlds can bridge generations and keep us connected through shared experiences.
Speaking of connections, I can just imagine while we're talking about this right now, there might be just one of our listeners thinking, hey Skinner, have you and Chalmers delved into Neopia yourself? Created accounts?
Oh, that could well be, and trust me, you imaginary listener, you have no idea. We've been spending countless hours navigating Neopia together. Energetic from setting up our Neo homes to trying our hand at those classic games like Furballs and Fishing Derby. It's been a whirlwind of fun and, let's admit it, a few hilarious mishaps too. Chuckles, I remember trying to navigate the cheese rolling game. Let's just say my virtual pet wasn't very cooperative on its first attempt.
Care to tell our listeners, we too did manage to get the hang of it, given all our combined experience with actual pets.
Well, Chalmers, it's like unlearning everything and starting anew. But hey, the Neopets community is incredibly supportive. There are forums full of tips and tricks, and it's amazing how quickly you can catch on once you dive in headfirst. Plus, earning Neo points feels like scoring points in a game of Tetris. It's addictive.
I can see it now. Skinner mastering those virtual dice rolls faster than I can say Gambit or Chuckles. And you've already got that cheese-rolling book to fuel your virtual adventures.
Absolutely. Every time I crack open that book, it feels like stepping into a different era, blending the virtual with the tangible. And it's not just about the games. It's the sense of community, trading, and discovering new places within Neopia that really makes it special. It's like finding a whole new world within our own screens.
You know, Skinner reminisce about our cheese-rolling adventures and diving into Neopia together really made me realize how much we still have to learn from these nostalgic corners of the internet. It's incredible how a little spark from a fan like Rachelrocks can reignite passions, stepping into new chapters of the Book of Life and bring us together.
Exactly. And it's not just about revisiting old favorites, it's indeed about discovering new ones. We've got so much more to explore and share with you all, so stay tuned, folks. There's a whole universe of virtual pets, quirky communities, and cheesy adventures waiting just around the corner in Neopia.
That's right.
Well, Gary, before we dive deeper into today's episode, I have to admit, before this whole Neopets escapade, I was utterly clueless about it.
As was I, Yamer, utterly clueless, like a cloud without a silver lining.
Precisely. I mean, virtual pets. I thought Tamagotchis were a fad of the past. My goodness, I still can't believe we had absolutely no idea about 3 weeks ago what Neopets even was. In my defense, the concept of virtual pets was quite foreign to me. Though, as foreign as the moment Rachelrocks shared that fateful image in our Discord.
Ah yes, the infamous book of funny anecdotes about cheese rolling. I've never seen you click a link so fast. Say more.
Well, you know how passionate I am about proper cheese rolling techniques. When I saw there was an entire book dedicated to humorous cheese rolling incidents, I simply had to know more.
Though you did spend the first hour trying to figure out how to physically purchase the book.
How was I supposed to know it was a virtual book? I had already cleared space on our real bookshelf.
Speaking of virtual things, I must admit I was rather confused at first. I kept wondering if these Neopets needed the same care as Cumulus.
Is that why you tried to spray water at the computer screen?
It was a perfectly logical assumption. If Cumulus needs regular watering, surely virtual pets need virtual watering.
Though I must say, creating our first counts was quite the adventure. Remember how you spent 3 hours trying to find a cloud-shaped Neopet?
Only to discover they don't actually have cloud-type pets. Cumulus was most disappointed.
At least he stopped raining indoors after you explained it to him. But you know what really amazes me? How that one bizarre book about cheese rolling led us down this wonderful rabbit hole.
Indeed, though I'm still not entirely sure why a virtual world needs books about cheese rolling in the first place.
Why wouldn't a virtual world need books about cheese rolling, Chalmers? It's clearly a universal constant.
Only you would consider cheese rolling a fundamental law of both real and virtual physics. Seymour.
But think about it. We never would have discovered this fascinating world if it weren't for our wonderful community members sharing their interests.
And now here we are, proud Neopet owners and virtual cheese rolling enthusiasts. Though I'm still trying to explain to Cumulus that he can't actually adopt a Neopet as his own pet cloud.
Anyway, seeing that book in the Discord, it was like the universe was telling me, Yamer, you must investigate this Neopets phenomenon.
A divine mandate, if you will.
Exactly. So we started digging, and initially, I must confess, I was a bit confused about Neopets at first.
As was I.
I thought it was some sort of online pet supply store. You know, like one of those places where you order bulk kibble and those little squeaky toys.
I can see how you might have arrived at that conclusion.
Yes, I imagined aisles of virtual dog biscuits and digital scratching posts.
And perhaps a virtual cloud-shaped snack for Cumulus.
Perhaps. But no, it was much more than that. It was a whole world.
Indeed. A digital ecosystem of Neopets.
Exactly. And we were complete outsiders. Neophytes, if you will.
Like a cloud that has never seen rain.
Precisely. But that book, that glorious book of cheese rolling anecdotes, it was the key. It unlocked the door to Neopia for us.
It did, and that all thanks to the people talking about Neopets in the Twitch chat.
Yes, it was the reason we started researching Neopets in the first place, besides the picture from Rachelrocks.
I remember us sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by printouts from various Neopets wikis, because for some reason, people in the school system still print out everything instead of using nowadays technology.
Ouch, that one goes deep. And yeah, you were trying to explain the concept of neopoints to me at that time in the kitchen.
A complex economic system, it is, I can tell you.
It was. It felt like trying to understand the Federal Reserve.
I tried to simplify it. I said it was like cloud currency.
And I said, how can clouds have currency? They don't even have pockets.
A valid point.
But we persevered. We had to understand this world, this Neopia.
For the sake of our listeners, of course.
And for the sake of that book. I mean, what kind of anecdotes about cheese rolling could possibly exist in a virtual world filled with Neopets?
I pondered that very question myself.
So, we took the plunge. We created our accounts.
A momentous occasion.
Indeed. I remember selecting my Neopet.
Which one did you choose again?
Oh, I went with a Grarl. Seemed appropriate given my culinary inclinations.
A wise choice.
And you, Gary, what was your first Neopet?
I opted for a Flotsam and Alter Epiphany. The Flotsam reminded me of Cumulus in a way.
Ah, yes. The aquatic connection.
Precisely Skinner, like a dolphin with a horn, a unicolphin.
And then, we were in Neopia. A world of wonder, and quite frankly, a little bit of bewilderment.
I must admit, I was quite taken aback by the sheer variety of landscapes.
Me too. It was like stepping into a digital travel brochure. But enough about the beginnings, let's dive really deep now. You know, Chalmers, exploring Neopia last week was quite the adventure. I spent hours wandering around Mystery Island, basking in that virtual tropical paradise.
Mystery Island. Say more while you were working on your virtual 10. I was scaling the peaks of Terror Mountain. The snow graphics from 2004 were absolutely breathtaking.
Terra Mountain! Oh my, wasn't that a bit dangerous, dear? I heard there was a snowager up there.
The snowager was asleep when I visited, though I must admit, I did sprint past his cave like a superintendent possessed. But tell me more about Mystery Island. Did you try any of those games?
Oh, don't get me started on the games. I attempted Volcano Run 17 times. 17 times. Chalmers. And each time, my poor Neopet got singed.
At least you managed to play something. I spent 3 hours trying to teach my Cloud Neopet proper formation techniques. Cumulus was not impressed with my amateur meteorological advice.
Speaking of Cumulus, did you see the piece about Cloud-type Neopets in last week's Neopian Times? I never expected a virtual newspaper to have such thorough coverage.
The Neopian Times. I actually submitted an article about efficient superintending in Neopia, but it was rejected, apparently. How to properly inspect a Neo-home wasn't quite what they were looking for.
Oh dear, that reminds me of when I tried to submit my steamed hams recipe to their culinary section. They said Neopia doesn't even have hamburgers.
Too bad, but speaking of our adventures, did you see those adorable pets in the shop? I've been considering getting one for Cumulus, my real Cloud, not the Neopet.
For Cumulus? But dear, wouldn't the pet just fall through him? Though I suppose that's not the strangest thing in Neopia. Have you heard about the cheese rolling?
Cheese rolling. Do tell. Say more.
Well, I found this fascinating book in the Neopian bookshop titled Advanced Techniques in Downhill Cheese Rolling. Can you believe? They have an entire sport dedicated to rolling cheese.
That's nothing. I discovered a book called Cloud Watching for the Particularly Patient. I bought 17 copies for Cumulus.
17 copies. The same book.
Each one has slightly different cloud formations, Yamer. Besides, you're the one who spent 40,000 new albums on omelets.
Those omelettes were an investment. I was planning to open the first virtual Memfield cuisine restaurant in Neopia.
Say more. That's not how Neopia works. You can't just... Wait, did you actually fill out a business permit application?
3. Actually, the Neopian government has a very efficient bureaucracy. though they did seem confused by my request to burn food in a virtual space.
Only you would try to navigate virtual red tape, dear. But tell me more about Mystery Island. Did you try the training school?
Oh, that was a disaster. I tried to enroll, but my Neopet kept falling asleep during the Codestone lessons. The Techo master was not impressed.
Speaking of falling asleep, did you visit the haunted woods? I dozed off for just a moment and woke up to find my Neopet had wandered into the brain tree's territory.
The brain tree! Good Lord, what happened?
It turned out fine. The brain tree just wanted to ask questions about Neopian history. Though I must say, for a brain on a tree, it was surprisingly interested in proper school administration techniques. We also had a lively discussion about budget cuts in the school system.
Withholding money for the future of the country and the entire planet is always a sensible investment. But back to the brain tree. That reminds me of when I visited Fairyland. Did you know they have an employment office there? I submitted my resume, but apparently, principal of Memfield Elementary wasn't what they were looking for in a cloud fairy, too.
You applied to be a cloud fairy. Samer, I'm the one with the pet cloud.
Well, I thought it might help me understand your relationship with Cumulus better. Speaking of which, did you see the new pets in the shop?
Don't even think about it. Cumulus is still recovering from the time you tried to introduce him to that miniature weather system.
It was just a small rain cloud. How was I supposed to know? It would give Cumulus an identity crisis.
At least it wasn't as bad as your attempt to teach the soup fairy your steamed ham's recipe.
The soup fairy is stuck in her ways. Chalmers. A little innovation never hurt anyone's soup kitchen.
Innovation. Seymour, you tried to convince her that steam was a soup flavor.
And I stand by that culinary decision. But let's get back to Terror Mountain. Did you try Snow Wars?
Don't remind me. I lost 15 games in a row to a particularly strategic Bruce. The shame of a superintendent being outsmarted by a virtual penguin.
If it makes you feel better, I lost 20 games of Meerkat Chase while trying to prove that steamed vegetables were superior to regular ones.
Only you would try to make an educational moment out of a game about chasing food, dear.
Speaking of food, did I tell you about my theory regarding the economic implications of cheese rolling in Neopia?
Oh no, not another economic theory. The last time you tried to explain the inflation rate of omelettes, we were here for 3 hours.
But this is different. You see, the cheese rolling economy is directly tied to the gravitational constants of Neopia's various lands. For instance, on Terror, Mountain.
Seymour, are you trying to apply real-world physics to a virtual cheese rolling economy?
Of course. How else would we understand the proper steam to ham ratio in various altitudes?
You really do find a way to bring everything back to steamed hams today, don't you?
It's all connected, Chalmers. Just like how the haunted woods would be perfect for aging cheese. Terror Mountain for freezing it, and Mystery Island for, well, melting it completely, I suppose. For a pizza or something.
Wait, is that why you spent all those Neopoints on that cheese wheel collection?
They were research materials. Though I must admit, I didn't expect virtual cheese to be quite so expensive.
Only you would conduct economic research in a virtual pet site, dear. Though I must admit, your dedication to understanding virtual dairy products is admirable.
Speaking of dedication, did you see the breadmaster's new recipes in the bakery? I've been studying his techniques for steam integration.
Is that why our kitchen was full of virtual cookbook printouts last week?
Those were comparative analysis materials. I'm writing a paper on the correlation between steam levels and bread rise in various Neopian climates. But now to something else, Gary Shmary. You know what really amazed me about Neopets? The community. It's still going strong after all these years.
Speaking of the community, Seymour, did you see Lamachin's post about their Neopets collection? 20 years of dedication?
And wasn't Mubani involved in that conversation too, while they talked about Neopets in the Twitch chat? Or was it Luna? My memory of the chat is a bit fuzzy.
Both of them were there, I think. They were sharing stories about their favorite Neopets moments. The way the community came together to discuss their experiences was simply heartwarming. Remember how they started sharing their pet trading stories? Some of them had been trading pets since the site began. Speaking of community, did you see the theory about where that cheese rolling book came from? You know, the one Rachelrocks posted in the Discord.
Oh, yes. Some suggested it was a rare prize from the Braintree's quests, while others swore they got it from that mysterious shop in the Haunted Woods.
I particularly enjoyed a story about finding it in a random event, though I'm still not convinced about the part where the soup fairy was involved.
The soup fairy has many hidden depths. Chalmers! Did you know she actually approved my steamed soup experiment?
Say more, she only approved because she thought you were joking.
Either way, it was wonderful to see everyone sharing their stories. Some of these people have been playing Neopets longer than I've been cooking food in the kitchen.
And that's saying something. Though I must say, I was touched by how welcoming they were when we shared our own Neopets adventures.
Even when I tried to explain my theory about steam-powered pets, they were so patient with my innovative ideas.
Patient is one word for it. I saw at least 3 mind-blown emojis in response to your steam-powered pet presentation.
Innovation often has that effect, Chalmers, but seriously, wasn't it amazing to see how this virtual pet site brought so many people together?
Indeed it was. Say more. Though I'm still curious about one thing, how did that cheese rolling book end up in Neopia?
Well, I have a theory about that. You see, it all started when a young Chia decided to experiment with different ways of food transportation.
Oh no, not another one of your food transportation theories.
But this one involves proper cheese aerodynamics and steam. Did you know that steam can actually affect the trajectory of a rolling cheese wheel?
Only you would find a way to incorporate steam into cheese rolling physics, dear.
It's all about innovation in traditional cheese sports, Chalmers, though I must admit, the community's theories about its origins were far more creative than mine.
Like the one about it being a secret prize from the Wheel of Excitement.
Or the theory that it was actually written by a cheese-obsessed Bruce living on Terror Mountain, though that would explain the chapter about cold temperature effects on cheese velocity.
The community really does come up with the most fascinating theories. Remember when they started discussing potential cheese rolling tournaments?
Oh yes, I even submitted a proposal for a steamed cheese division, though the logistics of rolling steamed cheese did prove rather challenging.
Speaking of digital endeavors, shall we tell our listeners about our own Neopets? One of mine is a graceful puffin named Superintendent Splash.
A puffin? Here I thought you'd choose something more cloud adjacent. Though I must say, my girl Chef Chomps had quite the appetite for fine cuisine.
Ah yes, Chef Chomps. Wasn't that the one you tried to enroll in the gourmet club?
Indeed, though they had some very strict rules about serving burnt food. Apparently, authentically charred isn't a recognized culinary technique in Neopia.
At least you tried. Meanwhile, I spent weeks teaching Superintendent Splash proper cloud formation appreciation. The poor thing kept getting distracted by passing puffins.
Oh, speaking of distractions, remember when I spent all my Neopoints on that distinguished gentleman? Background for Chef Chomps.
How could I forget? Though I must say, the monocle and top hat did give him a certain, Jeannie says coy.
But then there was that terrible day when Chef Chomps caught the Neo-flu. I spent 3 days pacing in front of the healing springs.
Say more. It was just a sneeze animation.
It was a serious medical condition, Chalmers. I even tried to submit a sick note to excuse him from the Gourmet Food Club.
Meanwhile, Superintendent Splash was living his best life doing synchronized swimming with the cloud formations.
You know, I searched everywhere for that cheese rolling book to read to Chef Chomps during his recovery. The Fairlambury library had nothing.
You tried to read a book about cheese rolling to a sick girl.
It was meant to be inspirational. Nothing lifts the spirits like Tales of Dairy-based athletics.
lifting spirits, like when you dress Chef Chomps in that Master Chef outfit. Was that uplifted?
Yes, though the tiny chef's hat kept sliding off his spikes. But what about Superintendent Splash's weather expert ensemble?
Ah, yes. Apparently, a rain gauge and barometer don't translate well to Piefin fashion.
At least your Piefin could wear clothes properly. Chef Chomps kept accidentally eating his accessories.
Though I must say, your dedication to Chef Chomp's health was admirable. Didn't you set hourly alarms to check his hunger level?
One can never be too careful with digital nutrition. Chalmers! Though I will admit, perhaps 15 different types of omelettes was overkill.
15. I counted at least 23 in his inventory.
Well, a growing girl needs variety, though he did seem to prefer the savory options over the sweet ones.
Meanwhile, Superintendent Splash insisted on eating only foods that matched the current cloud formations.
Is that why you spent all those Neo points on white foods?
It was about aesthetic consistency, Seymour. Besides, you're the one who tried to organize a virtual food critic society for your Grarl.
The Neopian Times rejected my column proposal, a Grarl's Guide to Gourmet Grading.
Well, at least both our Neopets had unique personalities. Remember when they met at the soup kitchen?
How could I forget? Chef Chomps tried to give the soup fairy cooking advice.
While Superintendent Splash was busy explaining the impact of atmospheric pressure on soup temperature.
Really crazy, that little fellows. Speaking of the soup kitchen, do you remember seeing any cheese-themed advertisements while we were in Neopia? I could have sworn there was a banner for roll-tacular cheese races, or something similar.
Seymour, I think you're getting your cheese-rolling dreams mixed up with reality again. Though I must admit, the idea of sponsored cheese-rolling events in Neopia is intriguing.
Just imagine it, Chalmers. The first annual Neopian Cheese Rolling Championship, sponsored by the Neopian Fresh Cheese Emporium.
Is that the same imaginary emporium that rejected your proposal for steam-aged cheese?
They just weren't ready for innovation in the virtual dairy industry, Chalmers. But anyways, what kind of endorsements do you think Cumulus would be interested in?
Well, he did express interest in promoting a line of premium cloud watching cushions, though his contract negotiations mainly consisted of different types of drizzle.
Is that why our backyard was mysteriously damp last Tuesday?
He was practicing his signature rain pattern, though I must say, the neighbors' gardens have never looked better.
That's one way of looking at it. But that reminds me, we should really thank Rachelrocks for bringing that cheese rolling book to our attention. Who knew it would lead to such a fascinating exploration of Neopia?
Indeed. And to think it all started with a simple question about virtual dairy athletics.
I've been wondering, do you think there might be other oddly specific books in Neopia? Perhaps Advanced Techniques in Underwater Chess, or Mixed Forest Basics, integrating a future-proof ecosystem in Neopia with the help of cumulus-shaped clouds.
Given what we've seen so far, I wouldn't be surprised, though I'm still trying to convince Cumulus to consider adopting a Peppa Pet.
Oh dear, how did he react to that suggestion?
Let's just say we had unexpected indoor rain for 3 days straight. He's very particular about his personal space.
Well, our listeners will be excited to hear about our plans for next week in Neopia. Should we tell them about the grand opening of our virtual meteorological museum?
Seymour, that was supposed to be a surprise.
Oh, but I simply couldn't contain my excitement. We're going to have an entire wing dedicated to the history of cheese aerodynamics in various weather conditions, so people in the cheese rolling game can test out new techniques.
And don't forget the interactive cloud identification station, though we're still working out how to prevent Cumulus from giving away all the answers.
Is he still insisting on being the chief cloud authentication officer?
He's already made himself a little badge out of condensation, though it keeps evaporating during his more enthusiastic moments.
Looking back at our time in Neopia, I'm amazed by how much we've learned from our wonderful listeners. Their passion for this virtual world is truly infectious.
Indeed. Who would have thought that a simple discussion about a cheese-rolling book would lead to such delightful discoveries?
And speaking of discoveries, did you see the latest development? Someone found a rare edition of the cheese-rolling book with gold, leafed pages.
Please tell me you haven't already placed a bid.
Well, let's just say Chef Chomps might be getting an early birthday present.
Seymour virtual books don't actually need gold leaf.
But Chalmers, it's for the historical value. Besides, I've already started drafting a proposal for a virtual rare book preservation society.
Only you would try to establish a conservation program for digital literature about cheese sports.
Actually, I've been meaning to ask, do you think we should organize a cheese rolling tournament for our listeners? Virtually, of course. We could ask ArticTiger for programming it for us and the community.
As long as Cumulus doesn't insist on being the weather consultant again. Last time he got a bit too invested in creating authentic racing conditions.
The virtual rain lasted for 3 days. Chef Chomps had to wear his little digital raincoat everywhere.
Though you have to admit, he did look rather dashing in that rain gear.
And it did lead to his brief career as a Neopian fashion influencer. Remember his Rainy Day Gourmet photo series?
How could I forget? Superintendent Splash was his main photographer.
You know, dear listeners, we'd love to hear about your own Neopian adventures. Have you found any peculiar books? Perhaps something about underwater basket weaving or professional cloud herding.
Or maybe you've discovered some other virtual world that needs exploring. Though I must warn you, Cumulus gets jealous if we spend too much time in other digital realms.
Before we wrap up today's episode, I simply must share our exciting plans for next week. We're going to attempt to establish the first ever virtual cheese and weather appreciation society.
We are? This is the first I'm hearing of this. Say more.
Well, I was inspired by our listeners' enthusiasm. Just imagine a place where cheese-rolling enthusiasts and weather aficionados can come together in perfect harmony.
As long as you don't try to implement your steam-powered cheese aging system again. The last attempt crashed the entire economy for 3 hours.
It was a simple miscalculation in the steam to cheese ratio. How was I supposed to know dairy products were so sensitive? Atmospheric conditions.
Well, dear listeners, it seems our time is drawing to a close for today. But before we go, we want to express our sincere gratitude to all of you who've shared your stories and experiences with us.
Yes, special thanks to Rachelrocks for introducing us to the mysterious world of Neopian cheese rolling, and to Liamachan, Mubunny, and Aluna for their wonderful insights.
And remember, whether you're interested in virtual pet care, cheese rolling, or cloud formation, there's a place for every passion in our community. Well, listeners, until next time, keep rolling those cheeses and watching those clouds.
And remember, if you see any suspicious cheese-related literature in your Neopian travels, do let us know. My virtual library still has plenty of shelf space.
Though, preferably nothing that requires Steam to read. We're still airing out the last batch of experimental texts.
Innovation comes at a price, Chalmers. But for now, we bid you farewell. Dear listeners, keep exploring, keep sharing, and most importantly, keep being wonderfully unique.